Thank you for joining us for this webinar about designing exponential business models. We are delighted to have so many of you join us live from around the world. My name is Lisa K. Solomon, and I'm the Managing Director of Transformational Practices here at Singularity University. I'll be your moderator today in conversation with Patrick Pijl about designing exponential business models. At Singularity, we empower leaders with the mindset, skill set, and network to build breakthrough solutions that leverage emerging technologies like artificial intelligence, robotics, digital biology, digital manufacturing to solve the world's biggest problems. Today, we are going to talk about designing exponential business models. This is the beginning of our Exponential Leadership Webinar Series, which is about helping leaders change the mindset of what's possible with these accelerating technologies to design abundant futures. Today, we're going to talk about the exponential mindset, and we're going to expose you to some new tools and disciplines for how you could think about accelerating value within your own organizations. We are incredibly fortunate today to be joined by Patrick Pijl. He is a good friend and close colleague who is one of the world's foremost experts on business model innovation. Patrick joined us from around the world of where we are in Silicon Valley, from Amsterdam, and we're delighted to have him on our opening show of Exponential Leaders and the series that will follow, helping all of you design more positive futures. A few quick housekeeping items before we get started. All participants will be muted throughout the duration of the presentation to ensure the best quality for all. During the presentation, if you should encounter any audio issues, please refresh your browser and check your computer's audio settings. We will save 15 minutes at the end of the webinar for your questions, but you don't need to wait to submit them. Please use the chat button, the bottom left hand of your screen, to submit your questions as they occur to you. We will try to get through as many questions as we can during our time, and if we don't, we will try our best to answer them even after the webinar is done. Again, just click the chat button to ask a question at any time. Finally, we are recording today's webinar, and we will share the link with you following the webinar. That way you can listen to it again and even share it with others to start this conversation within your own organization. I am absolutely delighted to introduce our guest, Patrick Pijl. Patrick is the founder and CEO of Business Models, Inc., a global innovation consultancy. He is also the producer of Business Model Generation, one of the seminary books on business model design and innovation, which has sold over 1 million copies in over 30 languages. He is also, more recently, my partner in crime in the book we co-authored last year called Design a Better Business: New Mindsets, Skills, and Tools for Innovation and Strategy. Patrick helps leaders of multinational corporations, government agencies, NGOs, and startups to understand, design, prototype, and scale new business models for exponential growth and impact. It is truly an honor to call him my friend and colleague. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, I'm happy to be part of this webinar. It's very exciting to look into exponential models and also to understand how can you actually design them.
Fantastic. So Patrick, we will be in conversation today about business models. First of all, defining what it is. What is an exponential business model, and how do we get a better understanding of what it is and isn't? We're going to be talking about some examples of business models that are exponential, and we'll go through some design principles of how everyone on this call can think differently about designing their own exponential business model, as well as exploring some options for the future and things to be looking for. So let's get started, Patrick. So you've probably had more experience looking at different business models than just about anyone I know. Can you tell us a little bit about your thoughts on exponential business models?
Yeah, so I came across this picture of a crazy car that they designed for Burning Man, and they call these cars mutants. And what is cool that some cars you hardly recognize that they are cars, but they are actually beautiful works of art. And actually it requires a MacGyver or a Maverick to put such a car together and get it to the desert. And I thought, yeah, it's actually the same for designing exponential business models. This does not come from like the regular business people, but it really comes from crazy people, rebels, and it's not going to come from inside the building. So I think this is a kind of example, or it's really showing like you need to do crazy things and have crazy people to come up with these exponential models.
So let's spend some time talking about what is exponential and what does it mean to be an exponential business model?
Yes, I thought it's important just to start with definition first, because there's a lot of talk around exponential, but what does that actually mean? And if you look at the definition, then this is what Wikipedia says around exponential, and it says, yeah, it's the matter of the ability to create exponential. What it means that it's becoming more and more rapid than like a regular linear process. And when I studied this, then I also looked into the founder of Singularity, what Peter said, and he said, that when it comes to this singularity or this exponential model, it says it is very different for people to think exponential, and that means that people think more in a linear way, but they only see limitations and they don't see so many opportunities. So he said, I don't talk about exponential and such thing, but I talk about 10x. So I thought, yeah, actually, the best way to remind what exponential is about is that it's non-linear. And then Peter says it's about 10x. And then I don't know if everyone is familiar with the business model, but Alex Osterwalder came to a definition a few years ago, back in 2004, and he said, like, actually, it's the way, it's a tool that describes how you as a company create, capture, and deliver value. But then that's very hard to grasp. So he designed a visual tool to actually really comprehend how value is added in a company. So that's what the business model canvas is about. And here you see 9 building blocks that actually show how you, with the concept or with your company, can create value. So that means you need to understand for whom you create value, like the customer segments, what value proposition you offer, through what channels, how you maintain relationships, and then it means, okay, so what does the revenue stream look like? And that's the right-hand side of the model. And then on the left-hand side, the question is, okay, so how do you actually get that model together? So how you get it going, what kind of activities you need, what kind of key resources, and what are key partners that help you to deliver that value. And then there's a cost to it. So I thought when we define exponential business models, we now know that exponential stands for nonlinear, or actually for 10x, and then the business model is now defined. So then we can look into an exponential business model, and then I call it a 10x business model. And actually what I think then, what it stands for is that you just need to ask your question yourself, okay, so how do we create exponential value? And that's the single question I have when I look at 10x business models.
So Patrick, before you go on, I just want to, again, pause there for a second, and I really appreciate you defining these terms and in particular talking about the new tools. I think it's really important that everybody understands that the canvas with the 9 building blocks represents a disciplined way to think about understanding your current business model as well as potential future choices that you may make in order to get them 10x. That we can start to put some tangible understanding of where value gets created and how it gets delivered, as you said, in the front side of who we're targeting creating value for, and the back side about how we're doing it. And by articulating it in this map, in this system, it allows us to both understand what's working today and what we may have to change for the future.
Yeah, and what I like about this is when you use such definition like what Peter said, like 10x is easy to comprehend, but also the business model canvas when you use such a tool, then it's very easy to have a common language to understand all these other business models that are out there. So we use this tool like for so many years already, and by looking at other business models, you start to see, you learn a lot, and you start to see different patterns, and that also accounts for exponential or 10x models, and that's really exciting.
I agree. I think that shared vocabulary is critical within your organization, as well as you said, a way to understand what's happening in the world around you. So you could start to look at businesses that have nothing to do necessarily with your industry, but you could start to unpack those patterns and those choices to figure out what you might want to consider next.
Yeah, right. But then when I put the definition together and we thought, okay, so this is all about exponential business models, I immediately had the question, okay, so why are we actually designing exponential business models? And what is interesting is what you see is that people talk about the fact that the growth of population will increase and increase. And then the question is, okay, so how can we still feed all the people in the world, and when resources are limited, how can we actually close the gap? So yeah, there is a why around why we want to have these exponential business models. And yeah, I find it interesting to study this. What is your take on this, Lisa?
Well, I agree. I think that as technology enables our world to get increasingly more connected, it starts to open up amazing opportunities both on who we're able to deliver value to. So again, looking at the front side of the business model equation, where does value get created? What kind of value? As well as the backside, thinking very differently about both who can create value for us and also how do we think about different partnerships and different ways of supporting communities that have not yet been accessible to us because we weren't able to connect to them. So I really appreciate that this notion of exponential technologies and exponential imagination around what's possible can help close the gap across a variety of ways.
And then I started to reach out to people also last week on the internet to see, hey, what is it that people think about when you talk about exponential business models? And I put a couple of logos here together from very different companies that popped up that people say like, yeah, it's about Airbnb, and the other one said, no, it's about Netflix, and it's about Zappos. And that's interesting then to ask yourself, okay, so what actually makes these companies exponential business models? So what is Uber different from Kiva, or Amazon different from Prezi, but at the same time, what do they all have in common? And what is interesting is there is a list, it's top 100 exponential.org.com, where they also show a list of different exponential business models or exponential organizations. And this is some of them, but then you see that Khan Academy or Airbnb or Uber is very different from the other one.
Yeah, I think this is a great example. And again, we'll go back to something we already said in the webinar, which is that when you understand the vocabulary and the tool around what makes for sustainable and scalable business models, it allows you to be a student of all of these kinds of businesses, regardless of the industry. And so, for example, going back to your earlier point about exponentiality closing the gap, we can look at Khan Academy through a lens of what happens when technology allows us to distribute quality education to anywhere in the globe that has the ability to connect to the internet and watch a video of Sal Khan, for example. I think it's also interesting, and I know something that we're going to talk about where these ideas come from. And of course, in Khan Academy, it came from Sal Khan, who had no experience really in the education world, but was a hedge fund manager who was looking for a way to tutor his nephew in math. And because, again, of the connectivity and because of then the value that was quickly noticed and created on the other side, he's now able to scale the kinds of education that he's providing through that platform to, again, anyone for free who is interested in learning those lessons.
Yeah. And then when you start to study these models, we talked about Pijl before, where he said that most people think in terms of scarcity and linear growth. and they see limitations. And what I find fascinating is when, Lisa, you and I worked together with George Borst at Toyota Financial Services, he was actually surprised to see that when he allowed people to send in ideas on how to design different concepts for Toyota, then the ideas were not big. It was like very difficult to find ideas that were disruptive or exponential. And when we actually started to put these ideas together on a big poster in the back of the room, we saw that 99% of all ideas were small ideas, so kind of incremental. And George Borst was really in shock to see this. So we concluded actually that when you would like to work on exponential models or on big ideas, you have to do something different. You have to set the mindset to really go for the moon or do something big, because otherwise you will stick into the just incremental change or incremental ideas. And you could think of incremental ideas like, yeah, we could maybe call some more clients to increase our revenue. Or you could say, well, maybe we do some double-sided printing so we save costs. So these are incremental ideas. So this picture clearly shows that we need to have a 10x mindset and different tools to start thinking about exponential models.
Yeah, I think it's a great example, Patrick. And when we did this, just for those of you that are listening, this project, this was made perhaps a scenario that many of you can be familiar with, where a CEO of an organization says, we have to think disruptive, we have to think about innovation in a different lens. They had a 2-day gathering of the top 60 leaders to come together to think about disruptive growth for their company. And in advance of the meeting, they opened up an online portal. They had everybody submit their ideas for innovation. And what this map shows is that when we plotted those ideas up on a 2x2 to understand if these ideas were creating incremental revenue or incremental cost reduction versus this upper right quadrant of 10x, as Patrick said, most of the ideas were in the left-hand side of the 10%. And what's stunning is that we often think of innovation is really a set of ideas, and I think it requires a whole different level of imagination. And what we're hoping is that this discipline of having a tool to check your assumptions about those ideas can be invaluable. And that's a critical part when you're trying to truly change the way you think about where value gets created, scaled, and delivered.
And then, so let's look at some ideas that I put some business models here together to study, okay, so what is really, for example, 10x about Netflix. And of course you are familiar with Netflix, and they started with renting out DVDs, but what is interesting is that they really started to be a pioneer in the industry with coming up with a different model. So here is what I put together, the highlights of their business model. Is they served the mass market, but they started to test experiment with a subscription model. And that value proposition was something very different before. But what I liked about this is that when you think of a linear model, it was just producing or printing the DVDs and then renting them out. But now they have this content that they can stream. And the other thing what they do is they have this algorithm. They really understand what customers really like, what they don't like. And based on this unique content, they made like a very bold decision on their business model. They said, well, we are going to start to produce our own content. So actually these people, they came to watch their shows, and the company, they monitored the rankings, the popularity and interest of customers, and then they start to invest in their own content production. And that was really something unique that we haven't seen before, and it really changed the whole world of video on demand. So what I think here is what you see on 10x. What is 10x about this is that they first started to put content on in a streaming service, so not depending on any a DVD or something that needed to be produced. They could supply this through multiple devices, and they had this unique content that was put together based on these algorithms.
Yeah, I just want to pause there, Patrick, and say, again, now we can start to see the tool in motion, where if you compare even Netflix's business model when it was a DVD-based service where it sent it out, it looked very different than the kind of value proposition. And because the content was able to become digitized, it allowed for Netflix to morph into a streaming service to then get to the channel part of having multiple devices, which was not possible through DVDs, which allowed it to explode in value of what it was able to deliver to its subscribers. So I think it's an important evolution of what's happening that technology is enabling, which is the digitization of content in this case, that is really allowing them to morph their business model in order to take advantage of that development.
And so then I thought, okay, let's pick another model to look into Zappos. And when we look at Zappos, so what is 10x? And I thought at first sight, okay, so it's about shoes, and that's not really exponential now. But this is also what I saw, like they really delivered a wow. And when you analyze their business model, it's for customer segment. I kept it simple to look into mass market. But what you see with the customer relationship they have is that people really love the brand. And there is this community of people that actually do the advertising for Zappos. And why? Because what they're capable of is they really create this customer joy and this wow experience. So people love it, and they do the communication for them. The other thing what you see here is that when it comes to 10x, they really outsource even like crucial core processes, like the sales of their shoes and stuff, like on Amazon. You see with Amazon where there's the logistics and then the brands that they use, that they sell, and for the logistics they do with UPS. And one other thing what I saw in the resources is about their culture. And there's a lot of talked about their culture, but when you look at their culture, they talk about this holacracy. And what is holacracy is about is that you see that the decision power of people is really at the people level themselves. So there's no hierarchy, and it's decentralized, and it's also a network system. So there's no hierarchy, no procedures, etc. So when I thought about Zappos, it's about the customer joy, the network of people, the community. It's about the leveraged partners, and it's about culture. And then I show you one last model that we studied, and this one comes from the blue ocean. So for a project, we surveyed like more than 30 companies in the blue ocean. And what is fascinating about this is that when it comes to resources, we are familiar with 95% what you can find on the land, but we are not much familiar, maybe 5% what is possible to find in the ocean. And Stellar is this company who is actually they produce this how do you call this bacteria, or it's a snail where they are able to cure people through immunotherapy. And what is interesting about this, here you see the snail. So here it is. And what they wanted to do is actually to solve a big problem for people to cure from cancer. And they found like this, they call it the keyhole limpid hemocyanin protein, it's the KLH. And this is what they grow in the Bahia of California. And this is something that grows by itself, and now they are focusing on growing this so that they can grow this like a kind of bacteria, and that a lot of people can use this. So here you see in their business model, it's again for the mass market, and they would like to share this to the max. But the way they can grow this is unbelievable, and this is actually a exponential growth model with these snails. And they also use partners because they're only focused on growing these snails for this immunotherapy. So when it comes to this model, it's also about partnerships, what stands out in terms of 10x.
What I like about that example, Patrick, is that it's literally using the ocean, and it's also pushing themselves into blue ocean strategy of imagining something that doesn't exist, and really significantly redefining the competition and the opportunity.
So when you study all these models, and that's what I talked about at the start, is when you use a tool like the business model canvas, you can create a common language on, so what does it mean when we would like to design business models in an exponential way? So what I believe is that you can design business when you use the right tools for that. But then before you start to design these, it's important that you as a designer, you should really understand to embrace uncertainty, because if you're not able to do that, and if you don't have the guts to do that, you would never ever find exponential models. So what you see often happening now with different companies is they say, well, we start to move to a more digital model where we would like to leverage more the internet or our resources, but actually it is about incremental innovation. So one of the key factors here is that you need to embrace this uncertainty.
I was going to say, I want to really pause on this point, because this is where we talk about, I know you spend a lot of time talking about the difference between search and execution. And when we think about searching for a business model, it can feel very overwhelming and almost to a level of uncertainty that can, I think, make executives really feel a bit lost as to the first step. And again, I want to ask you a little bit around your experience of what happens when you've seen executives use the business model, canvas, and tool as a way of understanding other industries, as a way of perhaps mitigating the uncertainty, using them as case studies when you can break it down by these choices that they've made in the 9 building blocks.
Yeah, so what is interesting, what we learned from this study in the Blue Ocean is that when you study all these business models, then it requires a real strong vision for companies to really go there, dig there, and try to find a sustainable business model, because this doesn't come overnight. You really need to have a very strong vision and patience in order to do that. And first focus on getting subsidies from governments, leverage to work with other partners, and then find some philanthropist who's willing to invest and do a lot of technical prototyping in order to get there. So what you learn is actually when you spend time on studying different business models, same as we do now for this exponential business model, it will give you a jump start when you just learn from others and recognize the pattern.
I think that's great. I mean, you can start to look at analogs very differently. If, let's say, you're moving from selling products and services to more subscription-based, you can start to look at other subscription models, for example, that may be outside of your industry. I think it's also useful to look at antilogs, things that you wouldn't want to do, and to learn from them. And this suggests that leaders of business model innovation need to come to this process with a sense of curiosity and willingness to learn and to unpack some of the choices that they're seeing unfold around them.
And then, so one condition is that you need to embrace uncertainty, and the other one is really about a massive transformative purpose. And why that is, because if you're not heading for that, then you most probably will not find it. So this again, what feeds into your discussion, what you talked about, Lisa, is that you really need to have that, otherwise you're not going to find it. And that brings me actually to 9 different design principles. And one is very clear. I mean, if you're not solving a problem for the masses, most likely you're not going to need even a exponential business model. So if you're going to work on a niche or something, that will probably not require exponential business models. And when the next one that I studied here on the right-hand side, you can also see the building blocks of where this shows up. So here on the right-hand side, you see it's about the customer segment. And the next one I found is around the community of fans. And so what does that mean? If you look at a generic business model, it actually showed that when you would like to work 10x, you really need to collaborate with your fans in order to build your brand. So it is about how you engage with your community. It's about how you let them help you design new services, new products. And the trick is actually to get your customers into a community of fans. So this is a key factor, one of the key factors when you want to design exponential business models. The other one, what we see, if you look at the value proposition, it is around information-based services. So on the one hand, it's about, when it's not 10x, it's about the physical product, like, for example, a cup of coffee at Starbucks. But on the other end, where we are looking for, it's about information-based services. So what do we mean with that? Those are kind of services like LinkedIn, Spotify, Netflix, and Facebook. And there's a mix as well. So if you look at the value proposition, then you see that when you have information-based services, you're more likely to have a 10x business model.
Oh, I was supposed to say, Patrick, we can come back to this at the Q&A, but one of the questions that has already come up is the importance of digital aspects to your business model to creating 10x. And I think, here you're already starting to get at the importance of looking at the trends around digitization, both in terms of the value you're creating as well as how you are executing against it. So we'll come back to that, but I really appreciate that you put information-based services in the core value proposition, because I think that's really critical.
Yeah, and then another one around your value proposition is about, I call it social and collaboration. So it's not about functional, it's about social. But for example, if you take brands like 99 Designs, then they help you actually to, with a platform, to design, for example, logos that are actually created by others. So there's a heavy interaction and influence with customers. And also the community is decentralized, and it actually helps to facilitate the peer-to-peer communication when also you facilitate people that help each other. And then you see here, it's also key that this product development is coming through this peer-to-peer and to the community. So here you see a couple of companies that actually facilitate that.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out about that is that for a company like 99 Designs, it almost has two different value propositions. One is to the customers that buy their services, that are looking for logos or brands, and the other is a very specific value proposition to the contributors themselves. So how do they organize themselves to be the platform of choice for the designers that are increasingly getting opportunity to sell their services to different people through other organizations? So I think it's very interesting. I know you talk about this as a multi-sided platform, but another layer of discipline that companies can think about when they think about their value propositions to their different customer segments.
And then another one is around, and that's something that I thought about immediately when you think about 10x business models. You might think right away about scalable processes. And that's true. So scalable is an important factor, but it's only one of them. And what you see here is that it is about automated processing, so very limited or no human interaction at all. It's also about self-provisioning, and mostly these activities or processes are executed outside the organization through more scalable platforms. And in order to facilitate that, you also, as a company, need to have the guts to share this strategic data through APIs with other companies, because otherwise you could never really get it scalable and optimize that. One remark about lean approach is when you look at your key activities in the business model canvas, there was also a question around 10x, the 10x factor for companies like GE. So there was a discussion on, hey, why is GE becoming more and more exponential? And then they said, well, the lean approach actually helps you to be more exponential. So that means the lean approach for all core functions in your company but also the lean startup analytics, and also creating a culture or activities that allows you to fail and run risks. So I find it fascinating to find this one in as part of a 10x business model. So next one, this is around algorithm to the core, and this is about machine learning. And the best example I find here is, of course, Google. And this is about PageRank. That's the algorithm that Google Search is using to rank websites in their search engine results. And I don't know if you know that, but this PageRank was named after Larry Page, one of the founders of Google. And it's actually a way to measure the importance of the website pages. So this is all around machine learning and also sharing this data. And I think we don't even know 10% of what Google is able to do with these algorithms.
I think it's a great example also, Patrick, of when an organization builds a core competency and their resources, that they can then use that core competency as a way of jumpstarting a new business. And that's when you can start to use the left-hand side of the business model that's focused on investment of how value gets captured and executed in one area, and allow that to then ignite a whole new area.
And what I see mostly when we work with corporate companies globally is that many of them, they didn't even start here. They have that's what Peter Hinson calls, it's a Belgian author, he says it's about the shit of yesterday that the companies still need to solve. So this one is a crucial one.
I was about to say one other great example of that. I think that algorithms and Google is another one, is of course Amazon Web Services, right? That started off as a retailer and realized that they built this amazing back-end system of fulfillment that they were then able to launch Amazon Web Services, a whole new business model that is projected to be even more profitable than their original retail model.
And the other one is around, I call it here the holacracy culture. You can question then, okay, so is holacracy successful at the moment? What you see more and more, it's not about companies that explain their people what to do, but it's about decentralized decision making and a network way of working. So you see more and more this is becoming more and more familiar also with companies like ING Bank. So this is part of the resources in your business model. And that brings me actually to the last design principle, the number 9, is the leverage of partners. So what you can clearly see from exponential business models is that the building block of the business model canvas, the partners, are really full with different partners. So this stellar biotechnology is never ever able to put their concept or ideas to market when they don't use partners. And these partners can actually leverage what they do. And this is an example of Mercedes together with, I lost the name of the drone company. What is this called, Lisa?
Matternet. It's a SU company.
Yeah, and then what is interesting, they start here to work together, but what it exactly is about and what it's gonna help them with is not sure. You would maybe never make the connection with Mercedes and with these drones. But when it comes to leverage of these partners, it's not only about that, it's about the outsourcing of staffing. So do you outsource specific tasks or jobs in your company, but are they also mission critical processes? So for example, like Stellar or Zappos, that's what they do. Do you also use staff that you have hired, or do you use on-demand contractors? And when it comes to assets, do you actually own them, or do you lease them, for example? So this is around leverage partners, but it's really about actually being able to get more stuff done by working together with these partners.
I continue to believe, Patrick, that the partner block is one of the most powerful ones when it comes to innovation. I think we tend to think of innovation as a core capability we have to build within our organizations. Particularly large organizations spend a lot of time trying to change their culture, trying to build incubators within their organization. And if they change their mindset to understand what is the relationship we need to have with innovation, how could we, instead of investing so much money and effort into trying to change something that is really antithetical to the core DNA, but instead spend our time scouting for other startups, other companies that are doing things that could be utilized in a leveraged way, like the example you just shared with Matternet and Mercedes-Benz. It could be a far more efficient and profitable relationship for both organizations. So I really want to encourage everybody on the call to think about that partner block very critically and say, what is our relationship with innovation as it relates to smaller companies that are on the front lines, that are experimenting faster than we ever could in-house.
And so when you look at patterns, and if you would like to understand 10x business models, when you look here at the business model canvas, you see those 9 different elements. And what I find interesting when we start to put this together, on the one hand, you can use this for understanding what Lisa said, but on the other hand, you can also say, okay, so what would it look like if I would design my company into a exponential business model? So what do I need to do in each and every building block to get there? So you can do this as an ideation exercise, or you can even say, well, maybe we should put a model together in order to see how we can get there. And I didn't expect this to see, but I see that the cost structure and the revenue streams are actually a result of the way you add value. So it's logical that these cost structure and revenue streams do not show up. They are a result. But here you see again, solving problems for many, community of fans, very different value proposition, scalable processes, but that's not only about 10x, the lean approach, algorithm to the core, the leverage partners, and the holacracy culture.
Yeah, I just want to say also one thing about the holacracy culture. It came up in one of the questions about, how do you think about your igniting your people and your culture in order to create 10x business models. One of the core concepts we talk about is Singularity, is that technology can be a liberating force. It can take things that were once scarce and make them abundant. And I think that's true for talent as well. If you can find ways to ignite your talent to be working on your most difficult issues connected to that massive transformative purpose that you talked about earlier, Patrick, I think that is one of the most important business model choices you can make in order to unleash 10x talent potential. So I'm really glad that you put it on this model. I think it's really critical, an important part, that changing your business model to be 10x is not just fueled by technology, it's actually fueled by talent.
Yeah, so when you look at the future, so we thought about, okay, so what's going to happen next, or what can we expect? And, well, it's not news to you maybe, but what we see is that a lot of different services concepts are moving into platform business. And what is interesting, you see different industries, but you can already see, hey, when is this actually going to go to a platform business? So it would be wise for your own industry to even think about a model. What would it look like if it changes into a platform business? Another one is around AI, so artificial intelligence. And the question is actually, okay, so if this artificial intelligence is going to happen more and more, how is this going to affect exponential business models? And I think on the one hand, it's there to create the data network effect. So when you think of these algorithms, it's going to make them even more smart and faster and better, and it's going to make the product better and easily attract more users. So that's what I think is going to happen with artificial intelligence. And when you think, for example, development of robotics, then I thought, what do you actually need a culture for if you have robotics in your company? But for sure, your processes will be more scalable. But I'm not sure if this will affect everything in your business model. I think with robotics also, maybe you still need to have the community of fans, and you need to have a value proposition that people really care about.
I think this is great, and I'm so glad you gave us a glimpse into the future. And if we think about how to understand these unfolding technologies like AI and robotics, not just as one kind of bucket industry, but in fact can break it out and say, what are the implications of robotics on my core value proposition? What are the implications of robotics on my activities or my resources or my partners? We start to have very different conversations, and we start to look at the emerging industry through a very different lens. We can get smarter much more quickly if we think about these technologies through the lens of business models, through the lens of where does value get created, where does it get captured, and how does it get delivered? And ultimately, what are the opportunities to scale? And so I really appreciate that you put these in here as things to watch in the future. And again, gets back to a conversation we had around analogs and analogs and what you can learn from other business models that are emerging. So Patrick, we've had a lot of questions come in, and we have about just a little under 15 minutes. So I want to try to get to as many of them as possible. The first question I want to start with is from Karyapa, who says, if you were to embark on a 6-month experimental change process with the objective of moving a company's current working method towards an exponential business model, how would you roll it out over this test period? What steps would you take to ensure a gradual mindset change? And what would your level of intervention be? So I think, Patrick, this is a great question for you because you've worked a lot with established organizations, helping them not only imagine new business model ideas, but really change the way that they work internally themselves.
Yeah, and I think that it comes down to the notion of execution versus search. So if you take, for example, like a big bank and you would like to change it around, then and like to explore exponential business models, then those ideas or those models will never ever come from the company itself. It doesn't happen inside the company. What you need to do is actually, when you understand that this activity, searching for this new exponential model, is something completely different from the current business model at the bank, you just need to separate those activities. So you need to find your most rebellious people who are willing to search and go out of the building and try to find complete different models and have this exponential mindset. And what is difficult if you organize this in your in the established company, and also when you have the board or the management board actually support that initiative, because they are actually all around optimizing the current business model, and most likely they're not interested to run exponential risk with their current business model. So the key lesson here is that you need to find a separate team to set up like a separate company or a separate initiative and allow them for 6 months to search, where the first exercise is really around exploring different business models that are already out there, what you learn from them, and then set up different experiments on complete different exponential business models to see if they can test, if they can learn. And I think that's where you're most likely to succeed.
It's a great way to think about setting up a team. We talk sometimes here at Singularity about putting innovation at the edge, giving them some air cover and giving them an allowance and space to, as you said, search versus having the pressures of execution. I know that a critical part of that early search is making sure that you're thinking about the value proposition on behalf of your target customers. So I want to connect that to a question from Collard Miles, who asks specifically about defining value proposition. And I know, Patrick, this is another tool that you use a lot, and there's a whole separate discipline around thinking about value proposition as it relates to customers. So I wonder, would you talk a little bit about that, in particular around thinking about value proposition as a job to be done?
Well, I think that when you start to search for exponential models, it's not that those models will pop up and will be served on your plate. It's more first around creating a discipline in your company to observe customers and to have the curiosity to understand what their problems are about. So when you dive in deeper to the business model canvas, then it's the question, okay, so what are these true problems that customers are faced with, and how can you help them to solve these different problems? And then there's a different tool for that. That's the value proposition canvas. And what you see is that when you dive deeper into understanding customer their needs, you will find what problems they need to solve, and that's actually the key to connect with customers in a more deeper way.
I wonder if you wouldn't mind, Patrick, sharing the Wavin case study that you work so closely with, because I think that really demonstrates a fundamental realization about what customers really wanted, which was very different than what the company thought that they wanted.
Yeah, so Wavin is a Dutch company, and they sell and produce plastic tubes for sewerage systems. And they had an issue in the Turkish market, but because they were not in the top 3 anymore, they were close to number 10. And they started to think, how can we become the number 1 again? And the CEO said, we just need to sell more of our products. And then the commercial people, salespeople said, well, we have to have those products on site. Otherwise, we can never, ever sell them. And then they also said, well, in Turkey, the production facilities were 1,000 kilometers away from the hotspot of Istanbul, where there's a lot of construction going on. So they said, we need to just build another factory, and it will cost us 60 million. And when we started to think, okay, so if this is the only option of how we can actually get to the number 1 again and help our customers better, then we just need to do it. But somebody else said, well, I'm not so sure. So they start to see, okay, so what is the problem that our customers have? And when that was not clear, we started to do a safari, and we started to visit all kind of different plumbers who were actually potentially customers to buy these products. And long story short, we learned actually that these plumbers were not interested in getting these tools and products on site or within a short period of time. What they were interested in is to get education on how these tools can be best used and implemented on the construction site. So long story short, they didn't build a facility of 60 million, a new factory, but they started to build an academy for plumbers. And this academy for plumbers only costing 400,000 to build. And now more than 10,000 people have gone through this academy, and it helped them to get a much better relationship with their customers. And it had nothing to do with the price of the tubes or the pipes. It had nothing to do with the product itself. It was all about giving attention to these plumbers and understand what their real needs were about.
Thank you. I think that's a great example of a bunch of things. One is taking a very different approach rather than just sitting inside of your own building, debating ideas of what could work, actually going out to go and talk to the plumbers, as you said, on safari to really understand what they were looking for. My experience in doing this work is that often the presenting problem is not the real problem, which is why you need to embrace it with a spirit of curiosity, willingness to entertain very different ideas, and then combine that with the discipline of an analytical tool like the business model canvas to check your assumptions, as well as some of the other tools. We've had just a tremendous response. I want to thank everybody for your questions. They're continuing to come in, and Patrick and I will continue to sift through them after this webinar is done and try and answer as many as we can. The final one, Patrick, I want to end on before we wrap up the seminar. A lot of people have asked about how do you scale this mindset of change within your organization? So yes, we talked about doing an experiment on the edge, and at the same time, you don't want the corporate antibodies to basically eject some of these rebels. So can you talk a little bit about what you've seen around how organizations like ING is one that you mentioned. I know you've done some work with hospitals, get more comfortable thinking about business model innovation, specifically around pushing themselves to 10x models. What are some of the ways that you can help bring in this new mindset and this new way of looking at businesses without triggering all of the alarm bells?
Yeah, so I started to think what would be an easy way to articulate for business is what it means to think different from what they used to. Because why is it that they do the things they do? And then you see that companies have been built around optimized processes, the production process, and they're not so much looking into the right-hand side of the business model canvas. And when I started to look more deeply into that also with you, Lisa, is that we thought, well, it's actually about design capabilities what people also need to have nowadays. And okay, so what do you mean with these design capabilities? When you ask a designer to solve a problem, they're not going to build something right away. They're first going to sketch different options. They're going to observe customers. They work visually. They start to build prototypes. They set up experiments. So what I find interesting is that when you start to search for new business models with a small core team, you try to find these new models, to set up experiments, etc. And when you see that assumptions that companies have been living on for a long time, when they start to disappear and when they understand customers better, then this is a kind of fever that's going to go through the organization, and more people get influenced and affected by this fever. So with a company like ING, for example, we started to set up experiments to understand entrepreneurs better. And we assumed that entrepreneurs were interested to be helped by the bank with setting clear goals and targets and to meet them. But actually we found that that was not the truth at all. These could then find these solutions themselves very easily. What they were actually interested in is to get support from the bank to help them work towards the future and to have to be helped to develop a network with other customers of the bank. So when you see that these assumptions are not true anymore and they learn new things about customers and how they can help them, then you see that this small team of new design thinkers actually achieve results with little effort but different way of thinking, and that's going to emerge throughout the company. And what happens then is actually that you see that it's more easy to work visually, so they start to adopt this kind of thinking. The walls will be going out of the company, new furniture will come, Post-its will come. So there's a correlation between the number of markers and Post-it used connected to the way companies actually think nowadays.
Yes. I think that you're right, that it can really liberate the environment from being a sort of yes but culture to a yes and culture. And that comes when you really lean into a spirit of experimentation, and that when you learn what really serves customers, that can be so liberating and so exciting, but you have to let go of what you know in order to do that. And you and I both seen patterns where small, courageous leaders, even without the biggest titles within organizations, approach their colleagues through empathy to help them learn about what's possible and to share tools, some of which we've listed up here that can be found on designabitterbusiness.com. That kind of conversation that can start to happen can just be so inspiring and energizing. And that's really where change can happen, when people make brave choices to go in different directions and liberate the ideas of others. So Patrick, thank you so much for spending this last hour with us. It's really been enlightening. We really appreciate all of the attention and research you put into helping us define what exponential business models mean, helping us give some examples behind the ones that you showed us and others that we talked about in Q&A, others that you've written about. I encourage all of our listeners to go and read Patrick's blogs. He's constantly updating them with what he's learning, and to give us some thoughts about the future and things that we should be looking for. A few quick reminders before we end our time today. One is watch for the email with the link to this presentation. Several of you have asked about the slides. We have recorded this, so you'll be able to get this presentation and share it with others. If you have any questions about SU, or if you're interested in learning about how we help leaders of startups and large organizations build exponential organizations, understand how technology can create abundant futures, learn how to become exponential leaders, please send an email to info@su.org. We'd really love to hear from you. And if there's also ideas you have for future Exponential Leadership Series that we could provide for you, we'd really love to hear your feedback. Again, thank you everybody for joining us really around the world. Patrick, thank you so much. This has been such an invaluable conversation for me. And I'm grateful that you continue to help me learn about what's possible. So thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day and evening, and we'll see you in the next webinar.
Thank you.